Who were you before you were born? Buddhism explains. Chapter 1. The age-old question about our origins. Have you ever looked up at the vast, starlit sky and felt a deep, unexplainable sense of longing, a feeling of having been here before? A question of, where did I really come from? Not just your hometown or even your parents, but before that? This isn't some new age trendy question. It's a question that's been echoing in human hearts for as long as we've had hearts to question with. This innate curiosity isn't limited to childhood. It persists throughout our lives, resurfacing in moments of quiet contemplation, philosophical debates, and spiritual seeking. We yearn to understand our origins because it informs our present, offering a sense of purpose and, perhaps, a glimpse of our destiny. This very search was also central to the Buddha's own journey. He said, after his enlightenment, "Through countless births I wandered, seeking but not finding the builder of this house." He wasn't referring to a literal house, but to the house of our individual existence, this cycle of birth and death. And that builder he sought? It's not a god or a single creator. In Buddhist understanding, the builder represents our own craving and ignorance, the attachments and misunderstandings that keep us trapped in this cycle. This realization led him to explore the nature of existence in a profoundly different way. Different cultures, of course, have approached this fundamental question through various lenses. Some posit a creator god. For instance, in Christianity, it's often believed that God creates the soul at conception. Others embrace a cyclic view of the universe. Hinduism and Buddhism, for example, teach reincarnation, where a continuous stream of consciousness flows through different lifetimes. Indigenous cultures often hold unique beliefs deeply connected to the land. Certain indigenous tribes in Australia believe that before birth, individuals exist as ancestral spirits within sacred places. As you can see, humanity has grappled with this question in countless ways, each reflecting a unique understanding of the universe and our place within it. The Buddha, however, charted a distinct course. He neither pointed to a single, all-powerful creator, nor did he suggest that we arise randomly from nothingness. He found a middle way, avoiding the extremes of an eternal, unchanging soul on the one hand, and complete randomness on the other. The Buddha was renowned for his noble silence when directly questioned about the ultimate beginning of existence. This silence wasn't due to a lack of knowledge, but rather because the question itself is inherently limited. It's akin to asking, what's north of the North Pole? The question operates within a framework that simply doesn't apply. The Buddha, instead, focused on what could be known and directly experienced, the reality of suffering, its cause, and the path to liberation, rather than engaging in metaphysical speculations that cannot be definitively answered. This emphasis on direct experience is key to understanding his teachings. One of the core ideas in Buddhism is that understanding unfolds gradually. The Buddha often used the analogy, like the ocean that gradually slopes, this teaching deepens step by step. This signifies that some truths are so profound that they cannot be grasped all at once. We approach them progressively, through dedicated practice and lived experience, not solely through intellectual contemplation. The Buddha presented a view of a beginningless cycle of existence, a continuous flow without a discernible starting point. But if there's no beginning, how does this intricate system operate? How does consciousness transition from one life to the next? We'll begin to explore these intricate questions in the next part. Chapter 2: Evidence for Past Lives. What if remembering past lives wasn't just a fantasy or a religious belief, but something real? Something with evidence? That's what we're diving into now. And we'll start with the most extraordinary example: the Buddha himself. On the night of his enlightenment, as he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, the Buddha's mind became incredibly clear and focused. With this clarity, he described recalling countless previous lives. Not vague impressions, but detailed memories. He remembered names, the families, clans he was born into, the food he ate, the experiences he had, both joyful and painful. He said, "I remembered my many births, 1 birth, 2 births, 3 births, 4 births, many eons of cosmic evolution and devolution." This wasn't just a single past life. It was a vast, sweeping panorama of existence, stretching back through unimaginable time. This deep understanding of his own past lives became a cornerstone of his teachings. He understood suffering so deeply because he had experienced it in countless forms over countless lifetimes. But, you might be thinking, that's the Buddha. He was a unique, enlightened being. True. But what about more ordinary people? What about evidence we can relate to today? Consider the research done at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. For over 50 years, they've been investigating cases of children who claim to remember past lives. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist and pioneering researcher in the field of reincarnation, meticulously documented these cases. He and his successor, Dr. Jim Tucker, have gathered over 2,500 cases from around the world, studying children who, typically between the ages of 2 and 6, spontaneously begin talking about a previous life. They interview the children and their families and rigorously try to verify the details the children provided, often traveling to the locations described and interviewing people who knew the deceased person the child claims to have been. It's important to note that this research, while extensive, has also faced challenges and criticism. Some skeptics argue that the children's memories could be influenced by suggestion, fantasy, or cultural beliefs. However, the researchers at UVA maintain that they take these criticisms seriously and strive to address them through rigorous methodology. What's striking is the consistency of these accounts across different cultures. These aren't just kids making up stories. Many of these children speak about details that are incredibly specific: names of people and places, details about a previous family, even how they died. In some cases, the children have been able to lead researchers to the places they described, even though they'd never been there in their current life. Some children even speak languages they've never learned, or display skills that are completely unexplained by their current circumstances. One well-documented case is that of Shanti Devi, a girl from India. From around the age of 4, she started talking about a previous life in a town called Mathura, which she had never visited. She gave the name of her previous husband, Kedar Nath, described their house, and even recounted details of her death after childbirth. When her family eventually contacted Kedar Nath, he confirmed that Shanti Devi's statements were remarkably accurate. She even recognized him and other members of her past family when they met. The accuracy of her statements, confirmed by multiple sources, presented a compelling case for the possibility of past life recall. But it's not just children who report these experiences. Adults, too, sometimes have spontaneous past life memories, often triggered by a particular place, smell, or sound. Have you ever experienced déjà vu? That uncanny feeling of having been somewhere or done something before, even though you know you haven't? Or perhaps you have an unexplained phobia, like a deep fear of water that might be linked to a traumatic event in a previous life. Similarly, strong, inexplicable attractions to certain cultures or time periods could be echoes of past connections. These experiences, while often dismissed as mere coincidence or imagination, can be surprisingly vivid and persistent. The Buddha himself said, "Long have you wandered through this cycle of births and deaths, leaving a trail of tears." This is a reminder of the extent of suffering. These aren't just isolated incidents. They're patterns that emerge again and again, suggesting that there might be more to our consciousness, more to our history, than we typically assume. Chapter 3: How Consciousness Travels Between Lives. If we accept, even tentatively, that past lives might be real, the next big question is, how? How does something of us move from one life to the next? The Buddhist explanation centers on the concept of consciousness, but not consciousness as a fixed, unchanging entity, or a soul that resides within us. Imagine a river. The water flowing past any given point is always changing. The water you see now is not the same water that was there a moment ago. Yet it's still the same river. There's continuity, even though there's constant change. Just as the river maintains its identity as a river, despite the ever-changing water, the mind stream maintains a continuity of consciousness, despite the ever-changing thoughts, feelings, and experiences. This is how Buddhism views consciousness: a flow, a stream, a mind stream. Your mind today is not exactly the same as your mind yesterday. You've had new experiences, learned new things, maybe even changed your perspective on something. But there's still a connection, continuity, between your mind yesterday and your mind today. That's the mind stream. This presents an apparent paradox. Buddhism teaches that there's no permanent, unchanging self or soul. Yet, something continues. The key is to understand that it's not a thing that continues, but a process. The Buddha used the analogy of a fire. A fire is named after its fuel: a wood fire, an oil fire, a gas fire. The fire itself isn't a separate, independent entity. The fire exists only in dependence on the fuel, just as consciousness exists in dependence on the body and mind. Change the fuel and you change the fire. Just as a new fire can be lit from an existing flame without the flame itself being transferred, consciousness continues in a new life, shaped by the conditions of the previous one, without a permanent self being passed on. So, what happens when we die? According to Buddhism, the physical body breaks down, and the various elements that make it up, earth, water, fire, air, dissolve. But the mind stream, the flow of consciousness, doesn't just stop. The last thought moment before death is considered extremely important. It's like the final, strong current in a river before it flows into a larger body of water. The quality of that last thought, whether it's filled with peace, fear, attachment, or aversion, significantly influences the next stage. Tibetan Buddhism, in particular, has very detailed teachings about this process. It describes how consciousness gradually separates from the body, like a rider dismounting a worn-out horse. The different elements of our being dissolve in stages. The earth element dissolves, leading to a feeling of heaviness and a sense of sinking. Then the water element dissolves, followed by fire and air, each with corresponding sensations and experiences, such as dryness, loss of warmth, and cessation of breath. These stages culminate in a final dissolution of the grosser levels of consciousness. Understanding these stages is considered crucial for preparing for death and navigating the bardo experience with greater awareness and equanimity. After death, consciousness enters an intermediate state, known in Tibetan as the bardo. This is a transitional period, a bit like a dream, where the consciousness is no longer connected to a physical body, but hasn't yet entered a new one. The length of time spent in the bardo is said to vary, depending on the strength of their karmic imprints, their level of spiritual development, and the clarity of their awareness at the time of death. While the bardo experiences are shaped by past karma, they are not predetermined. The individual still has a degree of agency and can influence their future trajectory through their thoughts and intentions during this transitional state. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, a classic text, describes the bardo experiences in great detail. The Tibetan Book of the Dead serves as a guide for navigating the bardo, offering instructions and practices to help the deceased achieve liberation or a favorable rebirth. It says that in the bardo, the mind has 7 times the clarity it had during life, but it's also much more easily influenced by karmic imprints. This heightened awareness can be overwhelming, leading to confusion and disorientation if the individual is not prepared for the experiences of the bardo. It's a state of heightened awareness, but also potential confusion. The experiences in the bardo are shaped by the thoughts, actions, and habits accumulated during our lifetime. This state is like a bridge between death and rebirth. Chapter 4. How Karma Determines Your Rebirth. We've talked about consciousness flowing between lives, but what directs that flow? What determines where and how we're reborn? The answer in Buddhism is karma. But karma is often misunderstood. It's not fate. It's not some cosmic reward and punishment system. It's a more nuanced and logical concept than it's often portrayed. Karma, at its core, means action. Specifically, intentional action. Every action we take, driven by intention, creates an imprint, a seed, in our mind stream. Think of it like throwing a pebble into a pond. The pebble creates ripples that spread outward. These ripples represent the karmic imprints that shape the future trajectory of our consciousness. The Buddha put it simply, I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions. This isn't a mystical statement. It's a statement of cause and effect. Our actions have consequences. Those consequences shape who we are and who we become. The effects of our actions aren't always immediate. Some karmic seeds ripen quickly, like planting a seed and seeing it sprout in a few days. Others take much longer, even lifetimes, to bear fruit. This is because the conditions for a particular karmic seed to ripen might not be present right away. This delayed effect is known as vipaka karma, where the consequences of our actions manifest in future lives. So, what pulls us toward our next life? It's our attachments, our cravings, our clinging to existence. These desires, fueled by past karma, create the conditions for rebirth. Buddhist teachings describe 3 necessary factors for conception: the union of the parents, the mother's fertility, and the presence of a gandhava, a being seeking rebirth, a consciousness stream ready to enter a new womb. As we've established, the gandhava isn't a soul, but rather the stream of consciousness carrying the karmic imprints from past lives. And it's drawn to a particular set of parents, a particular family, and particular circumstances that resonate with its karmic tendencies. The Buddha explained, beings are reborn according to their actions, taking rebirth in families similar to their nature. This means that the qualities of our mind, whether we cultivate generosity or greed, kindness or cruelty, wisdom or ignorance, create an affinity, a resonance, with certain conditions. The circumstances of our birth, the time, place, and family we're born into, are the result of an incredibly complex interplay of countless past actions, not just a single cause. Some people are born into hardship, facing difficult challenges. Others are born into privilege and ease. This isn't a matter of luck or divine favor. It's the unfolding of karma, the playing out of past actions. In the Kulakamavibhanga Sutta, the Buddha explains to a young man the reasons for differences in people's fortunes. He describes how actions like harming others can lead to a short lifespan, while kindness can lead to longevity. He explains how generosity leads to wealth, while stinginess leads to poverty. He connects anger with ugliness and patience with beauty. In essence, the Kulakamavibhanga Sutta illustrates the direct relationship between our actions and their consequences, emphasizing the importance of ethical conduct. But, and this is crucial, karma isn't deterministic. While our past shapes the conditions we're born into, it doesn't completely determine who we are or what we do. Past actions create tendencies, not fixed destinies. We always have the capacity to make new choices, to plant new seeds, to create new karmic ripples that will shape our future. Through mindfulness and conscious effort, we can become more aware of our habitual patterns and make choices that lead to more positive outcomes. Education, culture, and most importantly, our own present actions play a significant role in shaping our lives. Chapter 5. The No-Self Paradox. Imagine holding a fistful of sand. You can feel the individual grains, separate and distinct. But open your hand, and the sand flows, shifts, and merges back into the whole. Where is the fistful? It was a temporary formation, a collection of individual grains given a label. Buddhism's teaching of anatta, or no-self, asks us to look at our own sense of self with the same discerning eye. The idea of no-self is a cornerstone of Buddhist thought, and it can be one of the most challenging concepts to grasp. This concept can be challenging to grasp initially, as it seems to contradict our everyday experience. We feel like a solid, separate me with a continuous identity. So, how can Buddhism say there's no self? It's not that our experiences aren't real, but rather that there's no permanent, unchanging entity behind those experiences. And if there's no soul, no permanent me, then what's actually being reborn in the cycle of birth and death? This presents an apparent paradox. It's important to understand that Buddhism distinguishes between two levels of truth: conventional truth and ultimate truth. Conventional truth is the way we ordinarily perceive the world, as a collection of separate objects and individuals. We have names, identities, and personal histories. This is all valid and necessary for navigating daily life. But ultimate truth, from a Buddhist perspective, goes deeper. It reveals that these seemingly solid, separate entities are actually impermanent, interconnected processes. There's no fixed, unchanging core that we can point to and say, "That's me." The Buddha used the analogy of a chariot. A chariot is made up of various parts: wheels, axle, frame, yoke. If you take the chariot apart, piece by piece, where is the chariotness? There's no single part that is the chariot. The chariot exists only as a conventionally designated entity, a collection of parts. Similarly, what we call I or me is a collection of constantly changing physical and mental processes, known in Buddhism as the five aggregates, or panchaskandhas. Form, our physical body. Feelings, sensations, both pleasant and unpleasant. Perceptions, how we interpret sensory information. Mental formations, our thoughts, intentions, and habits. And consciousness, awareness itself. There's no permanent, unchanging self within these processes. This doesn't mean we don't exist. It means that we don't exist in the way we think we do, as solid, separate, independent entities. We exist as processes, as flows, as interconnected events. So, if there's no soul, what's reborn? It's not a thing that's reborn, but a pattern, a continuity of cause and effect. Think of a candle flame. You can use one candle to light another. The flame on the second candle isn't the same flame as the first, but it's also not completely different. There's a causal connection. The first flame creates the conditions for the second. Similarly, the mind stream in one life creates the conditions for the mind stream in the next. It's not a soul transmigrating, but a pattern of energy, shaped by karma, continuing to unfold. Consider this. You're not the same person you were yesterday, physically or mentally. Your body has replaced countless cells. Your memories, your skills, even your personality traits are constantly evolving. Yet, there's still a sense of continuity, a connection between you yesterday and you today. The ship of Theseus, a thought experiment from ancient Greece, highlights this. If you replace every plank of a ship one by one, is it still the same ship? Buddhism would say that conventionally, we can still call it the same ship. But ultimately, it's a continuous process of change. So, the no-self teaching isn't about denying our existence. It's about understanding the nature of our existence as impermanent, interconnected, and constantly evolving processes, rather than fixed, separate, and unchanging entities. It's about freeing ourselves from the illusion of a solid self that needs to be protected and defended, and opening ourselves to a more fluid and interconnected way of being. By recognizing the impermanent and interconnected nature of our being, we can reduce suffering, cultivate compassion, and live with greater freedom and wisdom. Chapter 6. Science Meets Ancient Wisdom. For centuries, the insights of Buddhism about consciousness and the nature of reality were largely confined to the realm of spiritual practice. But something remarkable is happening now. Modern science, particularly neuroscience, is beginning to explore these very same questions, and the findings are often surprisingly aligned with ancient Buddhist wisdom. One of the biggest challenges in neuroscience is what's called the hard problem of consciousness. How do physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience? The feeling of being you, seeing the color red, experiencing joy or sadness. Materialist theories, which assume that matter is the fundamental reality, struggle to explain this because they cannot account for the subjective, qualitative nature of experience, what it feels like to be conscious. The Buddhist perspective offers a different starting point. It suggests that consciousness isn't simply a product of the brain, but something more fundamental. It's not that consciousness is inside the brain, but rather that the brain exists within the field of consciousness. This might sound unconventional, but consider this. All of our experiences, including our scientific observations, are ultimately experiences within consciousness. We can't step outside of consciousness to study it objectively. This highlights the fundamental role of epistemology, the study of how we know what we know, in our understanding of reality. And what about memory? The conventional scientific view is that memories are stored within the brain, like files on a hard drive. But there are cases that challenge this model. Consider terminal lucidity. This is a phenomenon where people with severe brain damage, such as those with advanced Alzheimer's disease, suddenly become lucid and clear-thinking shortly before death. How can this be if their brains are severely impaired? It suggests that memory and cognitive function might not be solely dependent on brain structure. Another intriguing area of research involves heart transplants. There have been cases where heart transplant recipients report experiencing new memories, preferences, or even personality traits that seem to have come from the donor. For example, Claire Sylvia, after receiving a heart and lung transplant, developed cravings for foods she previously disliked, such as green peppers and beer, which the donor had enjoyed. While these cases are anecdotal and require further investigation, they raise fascinating questions about the nature of memory and its possible connection to the body beyond the brain. These are just a few examples. There's a growing field of research exploring non-local consciousness. The idea that consciousness might extend beyond the individual brain, perhaps interconnected in ways we don't yet fully understand. Near-death experiences, NDEs, reported by people who have been clinically dead and then revived, often share striking similarities across cultures, including feelings of leaving the body, encountering a bright light, and experiencing a sense of profound peace and interconnectedness. The emerging field of contemplative neuroscience is studying the effects of meditation and other contemplative practices on the brain. These studies show that regular meditation practice can actually change the structure and function of the brain, increasing gray matter in areas associated with attention, compassion, and self-awareness. This aligns with the Buddha's teaching on developing the divine eye, the ability to perceive subtle realities through refined awareness. Famous meditators like Matthieu Ricard and Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche have participated in neuroscience research. This wasn't meant to be taken literally as a supernatural power, but as a description of heightened insight developed through practice. This insight arises from cultivating deep concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom, which allow one to perceive the subtle workings of karma and the interconnectedness of all things. What's exciting is that ancient Buddhist knowledge, gained through centuries of introspection and contemplative practice, is now finding echoes in cutting-edge scientific research. This isn't about proving Buddhism right with science. It's about a convergence of understanding, a meeting of two powerful ways of exploring the nature of reality. Chapter 7. Living with the Knowledge of Past Lives. What if you knew, not just believed, but truly knew, that this life is just one chapter in a much longer story? How would that change the way you live, the way you face challenges, the way you treat others? Understanding rebirth, even tentatively, can bring a profound sense of freedom. The fear of death, that ultimate unknown, can begin to loosen its grip. Death becomes less an ending and more a transition, a change of scene in an ongoing drama. But it's not just about death. It's about life. It's about seeing our current struggles and joys in a much broader context. The difficulties we face aren't random punishments, but opportunities for growth, learning, and the working out of past karma. By facing them with awareness, compassion, and wisdom, we can transform their negative effects and create positive conditions for the future. The good things we experience aren't just lucky breaks, but the fruits of past positive actions. This understanding naturally fosters compassion. We begin to see all beings, not as strangers, but as fellow travelers on this long journey of birth and death. We've all been mothers, fathers, siblings, friends, and even enemies in countless past lives. This realization can dissolve the barriers of prejudice and hatred and open our hearts to a deeper sense of connection. The Buddha advised, "Understanding rebirth, the wise person does good deeds that will be a support in the future." This isn't about earning heavenly rewards. It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences, not just in this life, but in lives to come. It's about cultivating qualities like generosity, kindness, patience, and wisdom, knowing that these will create positive conditions for ourselves and others, both now and in the future. So, how can we practically connect with this understanding of past lives? Meditation is a powerful tool. Certain meditation techniques, such as past life regression therapy or certain types of vipassana meditation, can help us glimpse the patterns and tendencies that we've carried over from past lives. However, it's important to note that not all Buddhist traditions accept these methods, and it's crucial to approach them with caution and guidance from a qualified teacher. Pay attention to the recurring patterns in your life. What are the challenges that keep showing up? What are the strengths you seem to naturally possess? These might be echoes of past experiences, karmic imprints playing out in your present life. Notice your intuitive attractions and aversions. Are you drawn to certain cultures, time periods, or activities? Do you have strong, unexplained fears or phobias? These could be clues to past connections. Keeping a journal of these patterns and insights can be a helpful way to explore their potential connections to past lives. The Buddha recommended 5 daily reflections to cultivate awareness and live with greater purpose. 1. I am of the nature to grow old. I cannot avoid aging. 2. I am of the nature to become ill. I cannot avoid illness. 3. I am of the nature to die. I cannot avoid death. 4. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. I cannot avoid separation. 5. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions. My actions are the ground on which I stand. These reflections aren't meant to be negative or pessimistic. They're meant to awaken us to the preciousness of life, the impermanence of all things, and the importance of our choices. Even small actions, done with intention and awareness, can create powerful, positive karma. A simple act of kindness, a moment of patience, a conscious effort to cultivate understanding. These seemingly insignificant actions can have profound effects. These seemingly small actions, accumulated over time, can have a profound impact on our karmic trajectory.